Good morning, everybody. I see my hair is in disarray because it decided to dry very wildly, I see. But so, this is the start of a 24-hour vlog, and I'm already like 11 hours, whatever, into the 24-hour period. So, yeah, that's gonna tell you a lot about the productivity we've had so far today. But it's actually been pretty okay. But so I am taking part in Pokéathon, which is the Patreon exclusive readathon that Jade organizes over on her Patreon. So that's JD Ray Reads, whose channel I will have linked in case you aren't familiar with her. But so I'm a new patron to her. Well, yeah, I'm a new subscriber to her Patreon, and so I wanted to do the full 24 hours for the first time joining, but that is now not happened. I woke up at 1 o'clock to join the starting sprints, and I did stay for the first sprint, and so I was awake until like almost 3 o'clock my time. But unfortunately, I've been dealing with sort of like neck shoulder pain for the last over 24 hours. And so that started to act up quite a fair bit. I had a headache as a consequence as well. And I was like, okay, no, we have to do some sleeping now because this is this isn't gonna work out. So I did end up going to bed after that, and so woke up again at 9 o'clock. Had a nice hot shower, hoping to kind of release some of that pressure on my neck, but that didn't really help all that much. But the headache at least has gone away by now, without me having to take a painkiller for it. But definitely, like the whole shoulder area, or like the back between my shoulders, that is really, really tight at the moment, and I'm not really getting that released at the moment. But so, for Pokéathon, there are a few prompts that I'm trying to fulfill today. So I'm basically trying to fulfill the prompts that are part of this gym, because like every month there's a focus on a different gym, and so on different type of Pokemons that you can catch to get a bonus for that round. And so it's rock type Pokemon this time around. And so I've already completed the first two challenges. So I've read a non-fiction. I'll talk about that later. And then I ate some berries. So I will have some more berries later to actually give you guys proof that I've eaten berries. I mean, but I had like an oatmeal breakfast with strawberries. So yeah, that's the eating section, but I'm trying to fill a few of the prompts. So what I'm currently doing is reading a historical fiction called All the Horses of Iceland in order to fit that prompt. And then I also want to still read a book that'll make you cry. So I'm going to read a Bachman book for that. And if it doesn't make me cry, then hopefully I can count it for the other prompt, which is a heavy book. And so we'll see if I can manage to do like 4 books in the end to feed all of those 4 prompts, with then the addition of the eating berries one. But so that is the goal for today. 2 out of 5 completed. And we are going into the second section. But of course, considering the fact that I did do some sleeping, it'll be the second half will be hopefully more productive than the first half has been. But so I'm gonna be listening to All the Horses of Iceland now. I have like an hour and a half or so left in that, while I am preparing for my lunch, while I'm eating it, and then after that, because the lunch is supposed to not take that long to prepare, but HelloFresh can sometimes be a big liar because, it's calculated on 2 people and I'm just making it by myself. So that's what I'm going to be doing next. Yeah, and check in with you guys later. All right, as it is evening, it's probably time for me to actually talk to you guys about the books that I'm reading, right? So the first thing that I finished was I'm Afraid of Men by Shreya, and I don't remember the last name. So this is a trans woman author, and this is all about her relationship to her birth body, but especially to the way that she was treated by men at different times throughout her life. Though also towards the ending, a section talking about the way that she was treated by women throughout her life. And it's a lot of reflections on masculinity and expectations on masculinity, but also expectations on femininity, and this sort of like binary thinking of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man. and reflections on both her time when she was trying hard to like embody the image of what, you know, a man should be, and times in which she was more embracing of the femininity that she naturally felt, as well as then looking into transition, like when she started to openly come out as being trans, and her relationship at that point in time as well. And this is kind of divided into a section called You and a section called Me, and this You is always like her addressing past aggressors, basically, people who have treated her wrong in the past. And this, of course, kind of feels more impactful or aggressive, kind of because of this use of the you narrator at that point in time. Not entirely sure whether I like that use, but I do also think that it creates this sort of like feeling that, you know, these aggressors kind of blend into one for her in her memory, because they're all sort of like embodiments of the same sort of like archetype of human beings threatened by the existence of trans people. And and there's also an intersection here at times with race, as she is of, I'm not entirely sure whether, I think she's just of South Asian descent. I don't think she's originally from South Asia, but talking about that intersection at least as well at some point as well. I think it can be an interesting read. It's very short, so it's an interesting read if you want to have a little bit of a look into the transgender experience and into the type of realities that they have, the type of encounters that they face from people who judge them based on purely their looks and the way that they choose to express their identity. And for that, I think it can be interesting. It is very short, so it's of course like not super in depth, but I did also really like its reflection on sort of like the fact that only by looking or sharing their suffering, we are kind of open to making space for them. Basically, that was kind of one of the points that she was pointing out, like in a discussion about the need to have trans women be able to go into women's bathrooms, or the opposite way, that people were really like kind of hostile and like not understanding unless she started sharing stories about her experiences and experiences of other trans women in like male bathrooms, and so saying that, like, you know, they need to kind of show their victimhood in order for people to kind of you know, like make space for them or be open to change stuff for them. So it was interesting. It was a good read, but it's also not one that really like compelled me. But I think like that doesn't necessarily always need to be the case. I don't think that this is a story there to compel. It's a story to share experiences and open up your mind a little bit in case you haven't had many experiences with the trans experience or haven't heard many voices within the trans community. Then the second book that I read was All the Horses of Iceland, and this was not a great experience. I needed not a nonfiction. I needed a historical read for my second prompt, and so All the Horses of Iceland was one that is really really short, and that I don't even remember why it was on my radar. I think it was like nominated in some sort of award at some point in time, so that's why it got added. But you know, it's like it reads kind of like a legend about how horses made it to Iceland. And as a consequence, it reads pretty distant. And my main problem with it was its length. I feel like if it was like a legend, really, really shortly told, then maybe it would have been fine. I didn't necessarily mind the story, but I definitely felt like it was a little bit dragged out. And so, as a consequence, that at some point in time, I was just like checked out of it, and it was just like, okay, I just have 1 more hour to listen to it, and it's just for me to get this prompt, basically, that I was still reading it, and then I felt like, and like also to be able like to say like, okay, this one is no longer on my radar. I've checked it out. I've tried it out. It's a short one, so I don't have to put it down, but I know that it wasn't really for me. And so we are now on to the third one. So I originally wanted to start the Bachmann next, But then I had to cook and I need an audiobook, and the Bachman one I don't have on audiobook. So I decided to look for a heavy book. And so we'll see. Maybe this book will also be the book that makes me cry, and then I can kind of see which one I'll use for what. I'm not entirely sure whether the Bachman has a heavy subject or not, but this one definitely does. So I'm reading Happening by Annie Ernaux. There is a movie about this, which I assume also is called Happening in the English title. I'm not exactly sure what it's called in the original French anymore. It can be something like L'incident or L'accident, something like that. Um, or L'événement, I think it's L'événement. But basically, this is a book about a girl in the 50s who gets pregnant and wants to have an abortion. So you can imagine that it is a heavy book. So, I mean, so far it isn't all that heavy. There was one scene that I was just getting to that was like, okay, not a scene to read while I was eating. But I'm expecting this to get pretty heavy and to be pretty heavy for a 2 hour audiobook, basically. But so I didn't get to see the movie in the cinema, and I don't know whether I'll want to see it after I've read this book, but I have in any case been interested in trying out some of Annie Ernaux's work, because I think her book The Years was also in some sort of a list of like best books of all times, or like that book at least got onto people's radar in recent years because of some sort of an acknowledgement. And so that's when I kind of looked into it, and I was like, oh, okay, she's the author of the book behind that movie that I knew was like kind of talked about, at least here in the cinema. And yeah, I'll I think I'll continue that one. I was kind of debating kind of switching into the Bachman right now, but I think I want to just like go book by book and not just be switching between books today. So I'll finish out the Annie or No one before I go over into the Bachman one. So wish me luck, because I'm going into a heavy section of the book, I'm sure. Morning. So yesterday I did still finish two more books. So I finished Happening by Annie Ernaux, which was really angering. Like I thought it would maybe be a little bit more triggering, but it was kind of told in such a way that it didn't necessarily evoke many sort of like feelings of, like, I don't know, despair for the character. It was very much like when it happened, it was to some extent almost empowering, because this is a woman in the 50s trying to find a way to get an abortion, which at that point in time was illegal. And so it's kind of like freeing almost the idea of like, okay, she has managed to get control over her life again and over her body and decisions that she wanted to make with it. um, and it's written in such a way that even though there's like descriptions of the baby and things like that, it didn't necessarily create like, I don't know, disgust or like not even empathy, because it's not like she's feeling or like that she's conveying strong feelings. I guess that is the point. Like we don't get a lot of insight into her emotional feelings at that point in time, which as a consequence also means you don't have much of an emotional reaction, or I at least didn't have much of an emotional reaction. My main reactions to it were like anger at society for, like putting women through this and putting women's health in such jeopardy by like by refusing to legalize this, which means that women have to find other ways to go about it, or of course they have their choices in life taken away from them if they decide not to go for those unsafe choices. Um, and something pretty powerful in it I felt was like it was talking about at that point, at the last moment when she has had her abortion, she is taken to some sort of a hospital, and there she also sees like the other side, like the women who do go through with it and have this unwanted child, and how they don't, like the people around them don't seem to be happier about these choices than about the choice that she has made. And so indicating that like women can never do right, because if she would have kept this baby, then people around her would have also disliked her for it, the same way as they feel disgust over what she has decided to do now. And there was also an analogy that she was making with sort of like the refugee crisis, and how like the villains of the refugee crisis are now like the people who are smuggling these people across borders. But she was basically saying like, I would have never had this abortion if it weren't for people who went around the laws to perform illegal abortions on women, and thus have these women get what they wanted. And so saying that it isn't all that black and white, that we condemn these smugglers for being outside of the law, but we don't really condemn the law. You know, we condemn the people who are working around the system, but we don't necessarily condemn the system, and that we should be having more of a hard look at the system that is creating these opportunities for smugglers rather than looking at these people who are in their own way helping people get their desires, even though of course it isn't necessarily the case that they're altruistic or whatever. They get a lot of money out of it, of course, but she's also indicating like the woman who performed the abortion on her, part of her reasoning wasn't necessarily that she just wanted to make a lot of money, but she also wanted to help these women. So for these smugglers, it might also be more of a gray zone where they also might have an actual intent of helping these people along. We know a lot of horror stories, of course, so I don't necessarily think that that is always the case, but that is also the case, of course, with people who performed illegal abortions and didn't know what they were doing. So I like that sort of like nuancing of saying like, you know, like we tend to look at things a little bit black and white when it comes to laws and like ways of going around the law. But maybe when these ways of going around laws appear, we should also look at whether the law is in fact infallible and is in like holds up. And then the final thing that I still read, so for that I did get a Pokemon as well, because I read a book with, like I read a heavy book, and my interpretation was of a book with heavy subjects, which is also the case for the final book that I read, which is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, or something like that, by Frederick Backman. I read it in Dutch, which may have been my downfall, but it was like €3 something versus like I didn't even find it in English. I think on like the website that I have, because I could have also done it through Amazon, but I'm trying to buy them all through Kobo because that's my new ebook reader, and otherwise I have to read it on my phone. And so this is a story about a grandfather with dementia, and it's about his relationship with his son and his grandson, and it's basically sort of like imagined, or like we see it from the perspective of the grandfather, and he's kind of like in his imagined brain landscape for most of the story, having a conversation with either his grandson and with his son. And sometimes the perspective can be kind of interesting in that you see the interpretation from the side of the grandfather, and through your understanding of dementia you can also understand what the son is actually experiencing in that moment. So it was heartbreaking to some extent, but it didn't make me cry. Like, and I don't know whether that's because of the Dutch, because the Dutch did bother me from time to time, because like I sometimes felt like I had to like read certain phrases a few times and be like confused a little bit by the structure of that, which happens regularly when I read in Dutch. I don't know whether I'm just not used to my language anymore, whether I don't read enough in my own language to know sort of like literary ways of phrasing stuff, or whether it has to do with Dutch versus like Flemish, which is my dialect, where these structures might be completely normal in Dutch and maybe not in Flemish. But yeah, I didn't cry, so I didn't get this Pokemon. But all in all, a very successful day, because even though I didn't do the full 24 hours, I still read over 300 pages in one single day. I finished 4 books, which is the double of what I know, even more, I think. I think I'd only finished 1 book up until that point. So I've like quadrupled the amount of books I'd read so far within the year. Of course, they were way shorter, but it's nice to have these sort of challenges every month now. It means I will finally kind of like prioritize some of those shorter books. So for that, I am definitely going to be using these monthly challenges, so the monthly Pokéathon that Jade is organizing. So yeah, I've had a great time during Pokéathon. I'll definitely want to join again next month, and so do a little bit of prep to see what books will fit in for that. The books this time around were a mix. I think I had a great time with like a great time. Very bad word to use for these, but I really think that the happening and every morning the way home gets longer and longer are really strong, powerful books. All the Horses in Iceland was kind of a book that I basically just read physically, but I didn't even read it physically, but basically just went through my head. You know, I listened to it, processed it, forgot about it almost instantly. And then the first book that I read, I'm already starting to struggle now to think which one was the first one. The nonfiction, right? Okay. The nonfiction I found interesting, but it's also not one that will really stick with me, but potentially it will have an impact on my thought processing when we're talking about the whole debate about transgenderness and genderness in general. I mean, I'm definitely on the side that transgenders can be whoever they want to be, but it will embody the experiences I have with it, or it will fill out my understanding, I guess, of the issue as well. So yeah, a great experience this time around, and hope to have a similar or even better experience next time around. There are quite a lot of prompts for next time, so we'll see. I won't have as like I think I'm more or less finished the obligatory what or like the ones that you could only catch in this gym, with the exception of the one that has to make you cry because I'm a cold stone person, I guess. But so yeah, with that, I am going to round off this video. Hope to see you guys in a future one. Bye!